Hey everyone, welcome back to FPL Fran. Today's video is going to be my Game Week 15 team selection. But as you guys know, of course, we didn't do a transfer plans video for Game Week 14 or Game Week 15, obviously looking into that fixture. And I will start off with the Game Week 14 review. Right now, of course, we're in a position where we're 43k in the world, so dropped back to where I was 2 weeks ago, where I was in the sort of top 45k, that sort of territory there. And yes, of course, it's not really too drastic of a move, but I actually thought I had a very strong team last week, and unfortunately, as it stands, I had a pretty bad game week. I think in terms of the red arrow, in terms of how some outcomes have not gone my way, and part of that is the frustration with an FPL where you don't get that sort of security from managers in press conferences, and you don't get that sort of security before the deadline in terms of who has a knock, who doesn't have a knock, and things like that. So as it turns out, of course, in terms of reviewing my team, I got 60 points. Palmer came off the bench with a knock, and obviously I took out Watkins for Darwin because I wasn't sure that Watkins would play versus Bournemouth because I didn't like the state of my bench. I had Archer, I had Cash, and I had Porro. Ultimately, those players scored 1, 1, and 0, and I didn't really want to have Watkins, for example, be replaced by Archer. So that was the situation that I found myself in, and I didn't really want to deal with that. So I ended up in a situation where I felt like I was forced to go from Watkins to Darwin to prevent myself from, for example, suffering from Archer. But as it turns out, of course, Watkins actually played the full match and actually ended up scoring pretty much a last-minute goal versus Bournemouth from a pretty low XG chance. But we know this is what Watkins can deliver, right? He's someone who ultimately this season has stepped up tremendously when it comes to the underlying stats because this Aston Villa team as a whole have become much more attacking, much more creative, and actually become, let's say, a top 4, top 5, or even top 6 attack if you want to put them at that level. And that's totally fair enough. Darwin, of course, missed a lot of chances, which is what we expect from him. But at the same time, you know that Darwin can still convert. It's not like he actually has not been able to score a single goal in the Premier League. And at the same time, he's a very creative player as well. He can get assists. Now, as I look ahead, of course, to Watkins, I think when I just review that transfer, I don't think I'm going to jump the gun back onto Watkins. Now, of course, I can afford going from Darwin to Watkins again, but he has Man City, he's got Arsenal, and then he's got Brentford away. Personally, I think the experiment with Darwin is going to last myself until Game Week 18. And whether, of course, I suffer in the long term as a result of that, because Watkins, for example, is going to maybe do extremely well versus City, Arsenal, and things like that, that's fine. I just think that right now, with Darwin having good fixtures, also seemingly having good minutes in this Liverpool team, I'm just going to continue with this punt with Darwin and sort of look ahead to getting Watkins back into the team in Game Week 18 when he is going to be one of the prime captaincy options. As far as the midfield, as I said, I'm very upset about the sort of Palmer situation. I didn't know that there was a Palmer knock, and these are the kind of things in FPL where I think you just have to accept them at times where you think that this option makes a lot of sense. I went 2 weeks ago, I went from Gordon to Palmer, and of course that was a huge error in hindsight. But I think in terms of, let's say, the logic of the move, I thought it made quite a bit of sense. And even, for example, looking at the Chelsea game versus Brighton, the fact that Chelsea were even able to draw a penalty, right, versus this Brighton team 10 versus 11 shows you, of course, that, I mean, that could have been a great game for Palmer. But of course, a lot of this is hindsight, and I have to sort of get over it. I think, though, because Palmer had a knock and Pochettino also confirmed it, I'm looking ahead to keeping Palmer as an option. I'm not going to, for example, exercise a transfer out for Palmer. I think for that reason, I think Palmer will stay in my team. And Bumo, similar situation there as well, where first time for this season, we actually saw him get subbed off before 90 minutes. And it seems like he signaled to the bench with a slight issue. Hopefully he gets to start in the midweek fixture, but otherwise, of course, that's very, very concerning for Mbumo. Hopefully he's going to be great as an option going forwards. I think we invested into Mbumo for that Luton fixture, but he was still able to deliver something in that fixture, so I'm not too upset about it. Saka and Salah, really no complaints about those two players. Salah, of course, a little bit, I would say, underperforming expectations. We can say the same thing about Haaland as well, considering how good the fixtures were, considering particularly in Haaland's case, how good the chances were, and also how he was totally robbed in the end of a potential assist to Grealish, right? Very creative performance from Haaland, I have to admit, but very, very poor in terms of converting his chances and finishing. One thing that I actually quite like is that Doku seemingly was subbed off early, and you know, from a sort of eye test point of view, I would actually say that it seems like intuitively Grealish actually fits a lot better with Haaland in terms of his propensity to actually get points and how he plays towards Haaland's style, because obviously Doku tries to attack the box, whereas at times Grealish is obviously very, very comfortable with crossing towards the back post, which is something that Haaland can easily, for example, take away chances from. So that's something that seems to be maybe beneficial to Haaland going forwards. I won't be considering Haaland as a captaincy option, but that's that. As far as, let's say, the defense, very happy I played Colwell. There could have been an opportunity where, let's say, if I got good Watkins news, I could have kept Watkins, and then instead of, let's say, playing Colwell, I would have benched Colwell. And then actually played Zinchenko over him. So that would have been a -2, which probably would have been, let's say, a net -7, right? Because I would have kept, let's say, Watkins in my team and not gone for Darwin. So that's an option, but it didn't happen. And I did actually end up going for the move towards Darwin. So that's that. I've sort of made my bet, have to lie in it. I'm very happy though that I got the Colwell points. Was very happy to see, of course, them do well. But then Gallagher, for example, chose to get a red card, or not chose to get a red card, but of course put himself in the position to get a red card. So that's two Chelsea back-to-back captains that have been sent off. And hopefully, of course, just in the next fixture, we have Colwell playing 90 minutes, but I think he'll probably be called on the bench. I think one of the things sort of looking at Colwell now is that you're probably looking at his position in the team being relatively nailed. However, of course, the question is going to be, does Cucurella take minutes away from Colwell in the next two games? And actually, that is going to be a slight concern for me, which is why, of course, I will probably be benching Colwell for these games, but trying to eagerly see whether he actually, for example, takes the starting spot back away from Cucurella, which, of course, is ideal for me, because if I can get a Cucurella, for example, being a bench option or a secondary option to Colwell, that would probably mean that I get Colwell versus Sheffield United on Game Week 17, which is perfect. And then in terms of Areola, I mean, the less said about him, the better. I think he's one of the worst defenders in the game, and part of that is simply because this West Ham team is actually a bottom 4, bottom 5 defense, and we can see that from underlying stats, and we've also seen it from the fact that we have gotten 0 clean sheets so far, and Areola making a lot of saves versus a lot of teams that we'd probably expect them to be able to shut out. And Crystal Palace was one of those cases where I think there was a huge mistake from Mavropanos, and that ultimately, for example, leads to Areola losing his clean sheet, but still not good enough. And we have so many options in the keeper positions at ridiculous prices this year. We have Raya, we have even Kelleher for a short-term punt, and we even have, let's say, someone like Dubravka, who could be a medium-term punt, right? Because it seems like Nick Pope has a dislocated shoulder. The expected timelines for a goalkeeper out with a dislocated shoulder seem to be at least 3 to 4 months, and that's huge. I think Dubravka at 3.9 is basically game breaking, and more than not, I think I'm incentivized to actually go towards Dubravka right now, because that would actually continue to, let's say, keep me saving a lot of money in FPL, and why not? So I probably would like to have two goalkeepers as well, so I'll probably be thinking about Turner to Dubravka, and that's going to be one of the transfer options, or for example, simply just going Turner to Raya as well. So that's the review in terms of my team, thinking about the landscape ahead. And also transfer plans, obviously being, as I said, either going to make a move for Turner into another goalkeeper out, because I've got a lot of money in the bank right now. So those are my moves. As far as, let's say, looking at the team selection here for Game Week 15, what I have for my team, of course, is going to be Dubravka in. As I said, one of my transfer plans is to basically replace Areola as my starting keeper. And of course, if Areola is my second keeper, I'm totally happy with that. However, here we have a chance to go Dubravka Raya. I think it just depends on whether we actually get the Pope news at all. If Pope is confirmed to be out for 3 months, bare minimum, then I'm just going to move into Dubravka. Even, for example, if it's 2 months, I think it's a similar situation where, once again, I will be going Dubravka. That cost saving is probably going to be very, very helpful for FPL. And it's not even a cost saving where we're downgrading deeply, right? Because Newcastle, as it stands right now, is probably a top 3 defense. And so totally fine with, let's say, paying 3.9 million for a ridiculously priced goalkeeper. And in terms of the actual team for defense, I will also be lining up with a very similar team to last week, but with one change. Colwell will go to the bench. Pedro Porro will come onto the field. I think West Ham, of course, yes, they've been able to score in a lot of games, but I think one thing to mention about Pedro Porro is that he has been incredible from an attacking point of view. So right now, I'm looking at a lot of starts for Pedro Porro in the future where I think he'll lose the clean sheet, but actually he's got a lot of attacking edge where I can generally say each week, I think it's worth sort of taking that punt to play Pedro Porro. So he will be starting. Gabriel as well, hoping that he gets once again another start versus Luton, and then Tsimikas starting as well. I don't know if Tsimikas will play versus Sheffield United. He played a lot of minutes so far and recently, so that's a bit of a concern. But I do think that he's played well enough where he can, for example, arguably say that he deserves to keep his spot. Whether he actually keeps his spot is another question, because I think Joe Gomez could absolutely be looming for that Sheffield United fixture. At the end of the day, though, I still have Colwell who can come off the bench for me, hopefully, right? Maybe Tsimikas will actually play no matter what, which is a concern, but hopefully if we can also get, for example, any news whatsoever over, let's say, Liverpool, that would be ideal. I don't think we'll get it because ultimately Liverpool are playing on Wednesday, but that's things as it stands. I might change, let's say, Tsimikas and Colwell based on any sort of news possible. As far as the midfield, I'll be playing with Salah, Saka, Son, Palmer, and Mbeumo. As I sort of said earlier, I think Palmer should be totally fine to play because he actually got some minutes in the Brighton game, so that knock shouldn't have, let's say, impacted him too much. I think hopefully he gets to start versus Man United here, a team that honestly have been terrible this season. So hoping that a Chelsea team that actually probably have underperformed the results, but actually look like a pretty competent team, have been able to, for example, get some good results versus good teams like City, good teams like Liverpool, and even Arsenal so far. Hopefully they can actually deliver from the attacking point of view here with Palmer and Mbeumo, hoping that he gets to play. Ultimately, this Brighton team are pretty depleted in terms of injuries that they've faced, and also just the amount of minutes a lot of these players are playing through multiple competitions. So hope that Mbeumo can do well here. And then Son, Saka, Salah, these are obviously the captaincy candidates for this week, because I really don't think Haaland versus Aston Villa makes too much sense. Personally, I think it's between Son and Salah for me. And the reason why I'm going with the Salah captaincy in this situation is because I think that Sheffield United are really just that bad. We've talked about how West Ham are actually a bottom 4, bottom 5 defense, but Sheffield United pretty much are probably the bottom offense in the league and the bottom defense by a country mile. And we have teams like Burnley, we have teams like Luton, we have teams like Bournemouth who actually probably shouldn't even be put in that camp. But yeah, that's how bad Sheffield are. They're still a step above, let's say, or a step below rather, a team like Burnley, and a step below a team like Luton Town as well. So that's the situation with Sheffield United. I think that they're a very easy captaincy target for Salah, and very excited to sort of put the armband on Salah here. As far as the forward line, we're going to go with Darwin and Haaland, expecting for Darwin to start. Of course, there might be the situation that, let's say, Darwin comes off the bench for 30 to 40 minutes instead, but I still think that that's worth a chance to play for, then let's say Archer as well. In this situation, I'm going to be playing Colwill as first bench option, and then Archer second bench, and then Cash third bench, just because I'm not expecting anything from Cash. He's clearly lost, I think, his position in the team as, for example, someone who starts every single game at right back. I predicted that last week where I talked about how Cash doesn't really, for example, look to me as the standalone, for example, nailed right back. It's very clear to me that he's probably still the starting right back and the number one there, but it doesn't mean that Unai Emery will find situations each week where Cash will have to play and have to start. And that's a concern, of course. We might have to just wait and see, though. The thing about Cash, too, in terms of my team is I don't really see myself necessarily needing to spend a transfer on the defender position so far. So I think the idea with Cash here is that he'll stay in my team for the short term, and maybe when I have the opportunity to move away from Cash, I'll do so with the defender transfer. But right now, it's not something that I necessarily need. I have a lot of money in the bank, and ultimately, Cash can easily be, for example, James. He could be another Newcastle defender, or, for example, he can also be potentially someone like Walker if I'm invested in, let's say, a City defender. My concern, though, with the City defenders is just that even if you, let's say, get Walker or Guardiola, I don't think any of the defenders actually have enough attacking upside. And I do totally hold the argument or accept the argument that clean sheets are pretty hard to find this season. And we've seen it in terms of, how results have been presented to us. We've obviously not seen as many clean sheets compared to previous seasons. We also see that teams are also conceding a lot more goals in terms of underlying stats as well, expected goals, that is. And for that reason, I think it might make sense to actually look for potentially an angle where I can go from Cash to Trippier, but I don't think that is something that I can necessarily afford in this team structure here, unless for whatever reason I can actually move away from Mbumo as well and suddenly move into another 5.x type player. But for now, I think I'll be keeping the team structure as it is. As I said, Trippier is, for example, a distant dream for Cash for, let's say, Game Week 18. But we'll see what happens. We might also end up keeping Cash if we expect him to play for Game Week 18 and the team has other issues to resolve. So that's going to be my Game Week 15 team selection. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys have a lovely time and some green arrows as we look ahead towards Game Week 15. Thank you once again to the members for financially supporting this channel, and thank you for everyone who's been subscribing so far. The goal, of course, as I said, is to get towards 20,000 subscribers towards the end of the season. Thank you guys so much for your support, and take care and goodbye.